I'm Shwa, and you are listening to Light Up with Shwa, a weekly podcast to open our hearts and minds on a journey with me. Hi, my name is Shwa, and I'm the host and founder of a podcast called Light Up with Shwa. I have a guest here today whom I am really honored and privileged to have in my life, and I am sure that you will enjoy listening to our conversation. We have many conversations. She's a very good friend of mine. Yes, I can disclose that. And she's an accomplished woman. I can talk about her for next hour, but I would separately have an episode for her. But here, I want you to enjoy our conversation. She's an accomplished woman, a role model for me, and I hope you have already subscribed to our channel. It is on the Groton channel and YouTube channel. You can also find us on iTunes, TuneIn Radio, and Spotify. And you can connect to Shwa on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook. So without further ado, let's talk to Judy. Hi, Judy.
Greetings, my dear. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Thank you for being here.
Good to be here.
So, let's begin.
All right.
I think I would like you to talk about what was your profession before you got into interfaith. So, would you briefly introduce yourself and talk about that a bit?
And I'll do a little bit of the ancient history, because if we do talk about parenting, I'll rely on some of my counseling experience.
Sure.
So when I finished college, which was a few years ago,
not too late.
Not too long, right.
Yeah.
I went into an organization called VISTA, which was a domestic arm of the Peace Corps at the time, and did a year of service in inner city Philadelphia with heroin treatment program folks. And then I went to work for a drug and alcohol adolescent counseling center, and it is that where I spent almost a decade working with teenagers, 13 to 18, and their families. And I would say that's where I developed some of my thoughts about parenting, which we'll talk about since I don't have any children of my own. And then from there, as you know, I got kind of excited about aviation and started flying. And that ultimately, I got my license, my private pilot's license, and ultimately that got me a job in a very circuitous way, unexpected way, with the Federal Aviation Administration. And I worked in the FAA for 30 plus years. Only, yeah, it seems.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah.
In mostly the air traffic organization. I loved it. It was great work and great people. And I am now retired.
Okay.
And a full-time volunteer. And part of that is interfaith work, which brought me to you and other good things.
We'll talk about that, definitely. So, was it love at first sight with this profession that you were in? Like, if you would recommend the younger generation, not that you are any old, and I don't know why you retired, but the younger generation, would you suggest anything from your experience that you can guide someone to be in this field, or should they go? How should they go? Women especially?
Oh my goodness, yes. Well, in aviation, it's still not nearly enough minorities and women in aviation. We need to do, in my opinion, everything we can to encourage.
And other genders also. Nowadays we should talk about that also.
Absolutely. So yes.
Okay.
And once you get bit by that flying bug, it's a passion, it's a love.
So you were flying also?
I was, but not as part of my job.
Okay.
I flew for my own enjoyment.
And you still have to do that for me.
I know. We must get up.
Yeah, I'm really...
We must.
Okay.
But in my job, I did not fly, because those are more commercial. They're much more accomplished pilots. I was a very low-time general aviation pilot. But what it did allow me to do was talk about, since I was in public affairs initially in FAA, I could talk about what it was like to fly, what it was like to use the nav aids and the communications. And so I could speak from firsthand experience, and it made a difference. But here's what I was going to say about advice to young people. Those years were with a federal bureaucracy, and I know bureaucracy has a bad reputation, but FAA was different. People were there, working there, because they love aviation, because they care passionately about aviation. And that passion and commitment to aviation really made it feel different to be working in FAA. And folks really felt like they were serving and creating something that made a difference.
So do you think it has been more, it's more comfortable place for anybody to work there now, especially?
I wish I could say yes.
Okay.
I think it's still going to require some pioneering.
Okay.
But if you carry a passion for aviation and a love for that,
Then
you'll
try
find
that.
your way. You
Okay,
bet.
you should.
You bet.
All
I
right.
would really encourage folks.
Thank you. All right, so what are you doing nowadays? Should I go to parenting or should I stick to interfaith first? What is coming to you at this time?
Well, I feel like I have so little to say about parenting. Maybe we should go there first and then it's covered.
Well, not necessarily if you don't have children,
Yeah.
right? I'm sure you came from a couple,
Indeed.
your parents.
Indeed.
So let's talk about that. Is parenting selfless or a selfish area of life for people to be in?
It's an amazing question. I suspect, but this will be only from observation, not from experience, that it's got to be a little of both. A lot of selfless, but there would be some selfish too, but mostly selfless from what I observed. As you know, I don't have any children.
Of your own,
of my own,
biologically.
biologically, but I do have a couple of goddaughters who I adore, and I observed their growing up, and of course my own parents. But what I was going to say, when I started counseling the adolescents, 13 to 18, I was only 23, 24 myself.
Very young.
And I related more to the teenagers than I did their parents. And even though I was supposedly providing communication skills workshops for the parents, I felt more simpatico with the teenagers. Over time, I came to have much more respect for the parents and the incredibly difficult job of being a parent and the very selfless job of being a parent. And I heard one of your other interviewees, Dr. Joe, the name is...
Fitzpatrick or Kelly?
Kelly, Dr. Kelly, goodness sakes, thank you. Say that he thought one of the things we needed to do for parents was give them more resources to be able to do their jobs better. And that was my experience in the counseling program. Nobody set out to be a bad parent. They all wished to be better, to do it better, that they hadn't made the mistakes they had made. And I don't think there were the resources there to really help them when they hit the snags. So if I were going to leave any message, I would say, anybody that chooses to be a parent, thank you. And that whatever we can do to make their jobs, to take a little load off, to offer some resources, is critical. So that would be the message I'd want to give as an observer.
Thank you.
You bet.
So I know that you're a very good listener. So do you think that's important in parenting?
Of course.
So you are doing so many things that a parent needs to do. So.
Of course.
Have you ever thought of adopting children?
I have thought about it. I think at this point I would be too long in life to adopt children, but I have thought about it. And I've certainly been auntie to lots of kids and loved every minute of it. But I think now I'll just keep being auntie. Because I think there's an age limit at which they won't let you adopt. And I might be there. I might not, but I might be there.
We are not going to disclose here any ages.
No, please.
All right, let's come to interfaith.
Okay.
I know that's how we met. So talk about that. Why are you in interfaith? What brought you? What tickles you? What bothers you?
Oh, dearie. I know you know this story, but for the sake of the podcast, I really had never felt, I was still working for the Federal Aviation Administration. I had no real thought about what I would do when I retired. That seemed 100 years away. And then 9/11, 2001 happened, and I was saddened by our country's response. I thought instead of going to war, we should be figuring out a way to talk to people about what was it that drove them to that level of desperateness. And I kept having this reoccurring thought that I couldn't get out of my head of women of all different faiths and all different cultural backgrounds sitting around talking to each other and finding out that we actually were quite similar, even though we looked quite different in what we believed or our background. I couldn't get that out of my head. And it's ultimately what brought me to interfaith work was, how could one begin to have those conversations with people who seemed so different? And got to know, you know what, we're not different. I love my kids, you love your kids, we want the best for them. We ought not be shooting each other, we ought to be talking to each other. So that was kind of what moved me in that direction.
Wonderful.
And it was a talk about Ramadan and about the fasting of Ramadan that I heard that made me want to sign up for an interfaith council. I thought, I need to learn more about Islam and Ramadan.
When you were here?
Yes, in Groton is really, I heard that conversation. And so that's what got me started.
So what have you learned so far? Is anything different? What can you teach us about your interfaith experience? How can you educate us? Somebody who doesn't know much about.
Wow. I know one of the questions was, how do you bring people to the table who don't believe in interfaith? And I mean, that is a lifetime question for me. I haven't got a good answer yet. I think, what I continue to learn is that when I am sitting at the table with someone that I don't know, and we're having a cup of tea, and I'm beginning to learn about what lights them up, to use your beautiful words, it's an enlivening time. I feel that I learn so much more about what's important to them. It's really hard when you've sat across the table from someone and look into their eyes and understand a wee bit about what's important to them. It's hard to hate them. It's hard. At that point, they're not a fill in the blank. They're not another.
Yeah.
They're Susie. They're Fatima. They're Matilda. They're human beings. And it continues to be what moves me to want to have that experience for other folks as well, just to get to know. I hear people badmouth a group of people, and I think you just don't know anybody in that group. It would change if you had a name of someone you really cared about. How do we do that?
So would you suggest people not to be fearful and just try at least to talk to people who look different or seem different than you?
And I think we need to figure out a way to make that happen.
With me, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we both look alike, or
no,
or maybe we are. I don't see you.
I don't see you any different at this point, but certainly first time we saw each other.
Right. And you were very welcoming, and you said you wanted to, have a subgroup that we were doing for GIC.
Yes.
Groton Interfaith Council, and that's how we started.
And you were already really engaged in that work and said, sure, come work with me. I'd love it. I think, so you and I both had the interest in being an interfaith, so that's first step. Yeah. If I think about people who are afraid, and I think about some of the emails and Facebook postings I see, if they're coming first from fear, how do we even get them to sit at the table and park the fear over to one side? I don't know yet. I know one of the thoughts when you work with young people is to not have them sit down and talk about interfaith, but you have them work in a service way. You get teenagers together and you say, we're going to go out and do a Habitat for Humanity build. So I might be standing beside somebody who has a different faith tradition from me, and in the course of hammering something or putting on a front porch, or that conversation comes up informally. And maybe it's in service for other ways that you begin to have conversations with folks. But how do you get people past that fear first is a question we'll debate for a long time.
But I think you have been doing it.
Well, maybe
through
so.
action, and that's louder than finding the answer. If you haven't, well, I think you have been doing so much in terms of bringing people to the table.
Great.
And having a positive impact without going into details. You know, and I know that in our community we have been doing that.
It is true.
We have been bringing events. We have done exactly what that she brought people on the table which had different views in our community, and without going into details, things are very good. So you did it.
We are doing it, huh?
Yeah, I mean,
but that's helpful. That's helpful.
Then I took that example on a conference that I was that I said, well, one of my colleagues, who is the vice president of Groton Interfaith Council, they asked me, how do you do that? So I said, well, this is a recent example. That's how we brought people on the table, but there was some background work going on. You cannot just bring people on the table and start talking about interfaith and, let's be nice to each other.
That's true.
It won't be genuine and authentic, I guess.
It is true.
Right? So anyways, that's very good. So what have you found interesting about your faith in this process? Have you explored it more? What have you done?
Of course. Well, you've heard me say this. When people ask me what my faith tradition is, I say I'm a seeker. And I have to say it carefully because they think I'm saying I'm a Sikh, although it's sick, as we've learned to say. The more I explore other folks' faith traditions, the more I find parts of their tradition that resonate with me, that, it's funny, the more I explore others' traditions, the more I really believe there is one higher power, and he, she lead us to have common ground. As you've heard me say, I don't think, if God is as all-powerful as one would believe, I don't think God would have only one way to come to him or her. I hate to use the gender. So I think the more I learn about other traditions, the more I value the differences and hope that we can come to a point where we don't think, no, your way is not right because it's not what I believe. I can say, I really get a better sense of what you love, what makes you feel good about your tradition. And I think I honor others more.
So do you think that you are in a better position now than you were a few years ago when you didn't know much about other faiths or other ethnicities and, the cultures as much as you know today? Are you at a better place?
Oh, darling, thank you for asking that question. Absolutely. I am the richer for having met wonderful human beings who open their hearts to me like you and talk about your faith.
Thank you.
And that is a privilege because you have spoken with heart and commitment and compassion. It isn't just, this is what Islam is. It is, this is what I believe Islam to be. And others have done the same. And I think that is a gift. I am the much better person for having had dear folks in my life who are saying, I believe with my whole heart in this, and I'm going to tell you about it. And that is a gift. That is a precious gift. So yes, I'm a better person to have had those conversations.
Yeah, no, not necessarily a better person, but at a better place within you.
You bet.
You
You bet.
I mean, you are a very nice and good person. So
Thank
we're not
you.
going into that. Then we have to have another 2 hours episode. But talking about being at a place, so maybe that people can hear you and see, okay, she doesn't look different from the people. I mean, she looks different from the people that they are not very comfortable with in our community or beyond, wherever this message is going. But to give them some insight from a person who is brought up as
a Christian, Methodist.
Okay. And who is a seeker, who is very involved in her church activities, but she's open and, talks to people who are brown like me. So you are a good example for people who have been, who understand what's on the other side, on the right side, right? And to come to this position, you are maybe, and I hope you are doing that in your work, right? Helping people to understand that give a chance.
You
right?
bet, you bet.
Give it a chance. Just at least talk. Nothing will,
Yes.
be bad about that, right?
And one of my struggles is, how do I speak to people who, so this is interesting. I find speaking to people who have different faith traditions with great curiosity. But someone who is really closed and really judgmental and really, I'm trying to avoid terms like racist or, phobic about certain traditions.
No, use it. We are very...
Well, I'm working on my own words, right, so that I'm not being so judgmental. It is hard for me to speak to people who seem so judgmental and so closed and so have such negative things to say about other faith traditions or other specific people or cultures or genders. how do I stay open to be able to speak to them? Not that I accept the words they use, but how can I stay open and engaged in conversation with them? That's my present challenge. So I get one of those Facebook posts that are horrible, I just delete it. Okay, is there a way I can have, or a family member who sends out how do I engage in conversation with them in a way that doesn't close them down?
That's a very good question to end this part of our conversation and continue this conversation in future talks. And this is not the last conversation that I'm having with her. This is the beginning for our audiences. Because this message is going all the way to Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and who knows where else.
Wonderful.
Even to Norway, maybe. So, anyways. So, let's talk about some challenging questions that or thought-provoking questions.
Oh, there were some too.
Anything before I go on, you want to say anything else about interfaith or faith or...
I want to say one other thing about interfaith. Because one of the things we worked really hard on in the Interfaith Council is to come up with ground rules. And I think that might be beginning to answer what I'm struggling with, which is, first of all, when we do have conversations about faith traditions, there is first ground rule is no trying to change somebody's mind. So when we sit at the table, it isn't, I hope you're going to grow up to be a Christian. It is, I hope that I can explain to you in a way that...
Or vice versa.
Yes. And that ground rule, I think, is so essential. So I just wanted to say we've really worked on ground rules. Also that you're not, when I speak, I'm not speaking on behalf of all Christians in the world. I'm only speaking on behalf of Judy. And I think that's helped our conversations. So I just wanted to say that the ground rules have been, I think, essential. And there are others too. But thank you.
Thank you. All right. So what do you like about yourself? Now let's get to Judy. A little bit. Well,
it took a long time coming up with that. No, I think I have a sense of humor, which I really am glad, because heaven knows in today's world,
definitely.
I think I am a good listener, and I do value that. And I have a great curiosity and love of learning about other people. Those are three things I really appreciate.
What would you like to change, if anything, about yourself? Don't start with...
How much time do you have?
I
worry way too much. Okay. And I just heard some great Buddhist quote about worry is a bad misuse of imagination. And I thought, isn't that interesting? Because worrying is about projecting into the future, or, oh my gosh, I wish that didn't happen in the past. And I do think at this point in my life, I wish I could let that go. So that'd be one thing I'd change.
Work together.
Good, please.
Okay. Are you afraid of anything?
Yes.
You want to share, or you don't want to? It's up to you.
It's tied to that worry. When I look into the future, I see things that really trouble me and really worry me. I worry about the direction I think the country is going. I worry about the environment. I worry about people's lack of, I hate to use the word civility because that's so old-fashioned, but people's inability to speak to each other without really getting so caustic and confrontational. But I definitely worry about where we could go as a people in terms of hating other people. So those things frighten me, you bet.
Okay. But you can overcome those. Yes. Yes, Judy, you can.
Absolutely.
You are capable of doing that. You have been doing so much. So
thank you, dearie.
Don't worry.
All right.
All right. Okay. So let's get to last part of our questions. What is the best relationship you have in your life at this point?
I think that it is with my husband. Most of the time. Are you watching?
Okay.
I am blessed to have such a great relationship. And also dear friends that I can have the kinds of conversations that we have. Okay. Those are my very best.
What is the purpose of your life at this time? Because that can change also. So,
indeed.
At this time, what it is?
It is in service to God. I think that's my most important reason for being.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any message of hope?
Can I read you one thing? Because I did prepare for this.
Yeah, okay,
and this, I was thinking, what in the world could I say that would be hopeful?
Yeah.
So this one is from Mr. Rogers.
Oh,
from
my childhood favorite program. Yes.
So from his Mr. Rogers neighborhood. And he said, and this was, after all that, again, 9/11 and children watching that on TV and what in the world. He said, when I was a boy and I would see scary things in the news, my mother would say to me, look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping. And
Wow.
I think that is a beautiful message to grown-ups and kids.
My favorite Mr. Rogers, by the way. I grew up with watching that.
Yeah, what an amazing human being.
So, in the interest of time, I will have to ask you my last question. What lights you up?
I loved thinking about that. I did. Well, I think lots of things. Great. I'm remembering a dear friend and her sister and her cousin and I went to see a play in downtown Boston. And then we came back to that dear friend's house and had tea and talked about matters of our heart and faith all hours of the night. That lights me up.
Good conversations. Huh?
With people who are willing to talk about their hearts.
Wonderful. And the chai that you like.
Yes.
Not chai tea latte.
No, chai, because Schwa makes an amazing chai.
And Judy doesn't like 1 cup of
No. So that
lights
lights me up. Absolutely. That time was so rich, so important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say before we...
Thank you for the opportunity to ponder these questions, first of all, and then to be in this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you for staying with me through this exciting episode. Please don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned for the next episode of Light Up with Shwa.